Mr Speaker, I want to take a short call in this debate. I have to echo the comments from previous speakers that it was a very interesting process picking apart the actions of a variety of people in what is, I echo the comments of the Honourable John Banks, an episode that did not reflect well on this Parliament. Perhaps I've been here a bit long, Mr Speaker, to talk of being naive, but actually I naively thought, in hindsight, that a committee with the gravitas of the Privileges Committee would operate in a reasonably non-political manner to try and get at the facts in the interests of all parliamentarians. And by and large, I have to say, during the workings of the committee, apart from the occasional sortie from various people to settle old scores, actually the committee worked very well to do that. So it's quite disappointing, having produced what is a pretty comprehensive report, to then come to the House and find that all the politics surfaces and all the things that perhaps weren't explored satisfactorily in the committee are now being aired. And seeking to lay blame at the feet of people like the Prime Minister, like the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, who actually, in the case of the Chief of Staff, came and gave evidence to the Privileges Committee, was questioned, and gave very satisfactory answers. Mr Speaker, the report sets out very clearly what we were actually asked to do, and to the frustration of some of our members, what we weren't asked to do, and that, of course, was to determine who was responsible for the release of the document in the first place. And then, as a committee, we set out to establish the facts. And the people who came before us, I thank them for the very constructive and honest and open way in which they appeared in front of the committee, gave us a clear indication of their view of the events. That enabled us then to put together a very good summary, which appears in this report, of what happened, when, and who was involved. So I do thank them, and in particular the help that was given to the committee by the Clerk of the House and her office. Mr Speaker, three things stood out to me during the workings of this committee and during the investigation. The first was the complete lack of understanding by someone of the stature of Mr Henry, and I'm interested to hear the Honourable Winston Peters' categorisation of him, but he has a reasonably distinguished career. And as I said to him in the examination, someone who has been around this place and been involved in politics for quite some time, the complete lack of understanding of the different nature of this place that he showed in conducting this investigation. So we all came to the conclusion that the first person he should have gone to see was the Speaker, who is our representative, who speaks for this House and who is in control of all the staff who work in this House, in this Parliament. And so that complete lack of acceptance that this was a different environment and set this investigation off on the wrong foot from the beginning. And secondly, again, for someone who has had such a long career involved with Parliament, to not understand the very special nature of the media in this place and their special role and the rights, if you like, and responsibilities that go with that, again, completely underestimated, completely overlooked. So there was no respect at any time from Mr Henry in conducting the inquiry for the hierarchy of Parliament. So the Speaker wasn't involved, and secondly, I think we were surprised that Mr Henry did not make early contact and maintain contact with Mr Thorne, the General Manager of Parliamentary Services, who was responsible for the staff that were going to be providing information. So those two critical mistakes made by Mr Henry set the scene for what became inevitable, that things would go wrong, that the wrong people would be accessing information, and that information would be made available without any regard for some of the privileges that we hold here as parliamentarians. The second thing that struck me during the investigation was the almost casual attitude shown by a variety of staff to the very complex nature of the information that they were required, asked, able to access. And we've heard some of that talked about by other members. So, what is the difference in the role of a minister and the information that you hold as a minister as against the information you have in your email box as a member of Parliament who is dealing with constituents, as against an individual who happens to work here at Parliament? The complexities of that was not recognised by some third and fourth tier people who were working for the inquiry and giving access to information at the request of people involved in the inquiry. And I found that casual attitude to that complex data by people at very junior levels in the organisation, with very little oversight by management, quite extraordinary. Thirdly, I have to say, Mr Speaker, that I was amazed at the lack of alternatives that were sought or not sought by Mr Henry conducting the inquiry when he, in order to get his information. And this was a point that I think Grant Robertson raised on a number of occasions, or it might have been David Parker, that he did have other options available to him. And in fact, he did indicate that he could have taken the inquiry to part 2, but decided not to when the information that Mr Dunn held was withheld. So he didn't try any other alternatives. And again, you would have thought that he might have involved the Speaker to talk about what of those alternatives might be. And that was not done. So those were the three things that I can add into the debate here tonight. Mr Speaker, I would say that it's interesting to hear both the Greens and New Zealand First, as they did at the committee, in fairness, seeking to show the General Manager as a bit of a victim of the inquiry. And there's no doubt that as a consequence of the circumstances, he did resign from his job. But in actual fact, when you look at the way that that inquiry rolled out, at any stage with the requests that were coming to him and his clear uncomfortableness, is that a word? He was clearly uncomfortable about some of discomfort, discomfort, with some of the requests for information that were being made. He again, his backstop, his support and his defence was the Speaker. And that is no different from anyone who is a minister and has an organisation, an agency that report to them. If there are difficulties, if there are things that are concerning those agencies, then any minister would expect them to be brought to them for some discussion, at least to make them aware of some of the consequences of those requests. And at no stage did Mr Thorne raise any of those concerns that he had with the Speaker. So I admire the man's work, and I'm very sorry to lose him from the organisation, but I don't see him as a victim of the inquiry, other than by the circumstances that he placed himself in. So, Mr Speaker, it has been a very interesting exercise. Again, it has shown clearly that we have more work to do to make sure that this doesn't happen again, and there are good procedures put in place to ensure that the data that is so sacrosanct to all of us is respected, and the processes of Parliament are respected.
Chris Hipkins.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.